Hi folks, welcome to the A Minute to Midnight Show. This is Tony coming to you from New Zealand, and with me I have today John Haller, and John is a regular guest on the show, but it's the first time we've talked since March, John, so welcome back.
Thanks. We've both covered a lot of miles since we talked the last time.
Definitely. So. Yeah, you were telling me offline your long road trip, and of course I was in the US as well. So, I mean, John, look, there's so much happening. There's just a million things we can talk about. To me, things that are really showing up at the moment big time is that I think Donald Trump's showing who he really is, and he's basically bringing this whole technocratic thing to pass big time very quickly with the Genius Act and the Big Beautiful Bill and numerous other things. We're seeing all the infrastructure being set up for the beast system really rapidly before our eyes. And of course, then you also had the Real ID. So there's a ton of things just in that alone.
Yeah, there is. I do think, we who look at Bible prophecy and talk about current events and how they relate and that type of thing, sometimes we get sort of bogged down in geopolitics, which is extremely volatile, and we could do many hours talking about that. But the technology side itself, I've been doing every 6 to 8 weeks. I've been doing a technology, AI, transhumanism roundtable with Bridget Scott Townsend, Pete Garcia, Tom Hughes, Patrick Wood, where we just sit and talk for 2.5 or 3 hours about some of the trends that we see in technology. And I think a good starting point is what Patrick Wood said a couple years ago in an interview. I think it was with Tom Hughes. And he said, when we get into this final period of human history, some call the tribulation, some call 70th week, that sort of thing, there are some events in the middle of that 7-year period. Jesus talked about the abomination of desolation. And there's a whole, I called it I think I did it, started, I don't know if I ever gave the talk or not. I started doing a talk like the week in the middle of the week. And because it'll be a very, we talk about things happening so fast right now, but Patrick made the point that when the Antichrist really completely, totally reveals himself at that time, he's not going to, come back from the temple in Jerusalem where he's declared himself above all that is called God. And he's not going to have a meeting then with the false prophet and say, hey, could we crowdfund a control system so we can control everybody and what they do and how they buy and sell? Because that's what's talked about in Revelation 13 and 17 and 18. Patrick's point was it's going to be ready to go. And all they're going to have to do is flip the switch. So as I've been watching the AI space, the technocrat space, the transhuman space, we could go for hours about that. And I'll just sort of remind everybody that it was 10 years ago, this past May, that Yuval Noah Harari went to Silicon Valley to Google headquarters to talk. And it's a talk that I don't think any of us found until the last few years, but I've played it many times. And he said this: I love coming to Silicon Valley. I see my friends, but I love Silicon Valley because it is here. And this is exactly what he said. It is here that the religions that will control humanity in the 21st century are being created. Now, he said that 10 years ago, and look where we are now. And this has become it is an existential crisis. It was 2.5 years ago, Tony. I sat in a hotel room in Israel at a Christian media summit put on by the Israeli government. And they had a business guy talking. You can find the video online on the Israeli press office website. And the business guy said he was talking about ChatGPT, that had just been released in the past week. So it's already got over 1 million downloads. And it wasn't too long after that where there was just this explosion of stuff in the artificial intelligence space. And the goal to get to, Ray Kurzweil calls it the singularity. Others, Elon Musk and others, are pushing for this. And it's a complete, total control grid for humanity. It's what, so I'm 71, and I've been following Bible prophecy since I was a kid. And there's been a lot of theories about how this mark of the beast control system comes about. And one of the things that we never were able to point to was anything that was totally comprehensive control. It was always, there were shortcomings in it in some fashion. And so this technology stuff, though, I think in our last roundtable, Patrick Wood and some others, maybe somebody else, pointed out that from where we are right now, when we get down 1 or 2 years, they're talking about an AI system that's 10,000, at least 10,000 times more powerful than what we have right now, which is probably 10,000 times more powerful than what we had 2 years ago when ChatGPT came out. So when you start stacking those exponential increases on top of each other, you're talking something that's just unbelievable. And so 2 years ago, when this really started to come to the forefront, you remember the famous interview with Eliezer Ludkowski, one of the guys who's helped develop these AI systems. And he said, it's an existential threat. And if people won't agree to slow down and stop it where we are, freeze it where we are right now, we should bomb their server farms. So in the interim, though, you and I and everybody else that listens to you on a regular basis and the guests you have know that nothing's been done to slow it down.
No. It's happening faster. And John, like, I mean, I mentioned that big, beautiful bill of Trump's, like how much money is in that towards surveillance and AI and creating more server farms and so on. You've got this Genius Act, which they're saying, oh, this means we don't get a CBDC, but what it is a CBDC by any other name, is, you know, basically so the government can bring control with that. You've got your real ID that Trump has pushed. And so all of these things together are combining to make this possible. And you know, and I see they're going to have to invest into like doubling the amount of electricity that's made just because of all these server farms and all this AI empowerment. So they're going to have to generate a whole heap more electricity to power these things. And they're built, as you've said, they're building them in all over the place, including near where you lived. And you also mentioned they're building a big drone factory off here, you said to me as well, near you. So this is just going so fast.
That's going to use AI technology, and I think that's one of the few things, as I've kind of a little different view on the Russia-Ukraine thing, that I think this is incredibly important. What's going on in Russia-Ukraine war is a complete shift in how war will be fought in the future, however long or short that period of time is. And what Ukraine is doing is way out on the technology curve. They're way ahead on the technology curve. So Russia still relies on, I mean, they're building drones and that type of thing. And there's been kind of this war back and forth where Ukraine comes up with these great drones, then Russia will develop something to jam them. Then Ukraine will, and this is a really recent development in the last 6 to 8 weeks. Ukraine was flying these using fiber optics to get around the jamming by the Russians. And now that has a limitation to it, but we saw that limitations like that didn't have an impact on Ukraine. They got 6,000 miles away from Ukraine and attacked nuclear aircraft bases where they use the nuclear aircraft for their nuclear triad or whatever it is in Russia. They destroyed a bunch of their airplanes with these drones. So they're destroying $10 million tanks with a $3,000 drone. I mean, the exponential power that they're getting from these drones is incredible. Now what they're doing, though, is because of the jamming and because fiber optics have the limitation, they're using AI to program autonomous drones, which will make the kill decisions on their own. And what Ukraine has now is Ukraine probably has more battlefield data about how these things should be programmed than anybody on the planet. That's why this war is, regardless of the side that you support, this thing is a huge game changer, and it plays into a lot of our end time scenarios that we talk about. And you're seeing this form. You mentioned the Genius Act that was just passed last week, and we remember. Just think back. So this is we're recording this around July 21st. So 6 months ago. No, I guess it was 7 months ago. No, it was 6 months ago. Trump took office, and what was the picture? What was the images that, at least to you and me, seem most important from his inauguration to his second term? Were all the transhumanists and technocrats that were sitting right behind him, and the massive amount of wealth that they have. I mean, they're richer than a lot of countries, and there was probably, I don't know, $3 trillion of personal net worth in just the row sitting behind him at his inauguration speech. And so the thing is, so if I back up for a little bit, I think one of the most significant video clips I've ever played was Pippa Malmgren at the World Government Summit in Dubai back in, I think it was 2022. And she comes from a financial family, and she's a financial analyst, manager, whatever it is she does. And she said, this technology stuff is developing, and we need a digital bill of rights to protect the rights of people. So here we sit over 3 years later, and have you gotten your copy of the digital bill of rights that the technocrats have put in place? And so there was a lot of hope by a lot of people that Trump wouldn't fall for it. Okay. And so now we have in the Genius Act, and it's called, I'm not sure why it's called the Genius Act. It's certainly not a reference to the people that enacted it and drafted it, unless you would say they're evil. It should be the Evil Genius Act. But it does talk about, and this is something that I've talked about, Rich Gillette has talked about, a bunch of other people have talked about, the tokenization of assets, turning everything into something digital and having a digital token to represent your property, your car, all of those things. And the argument is, well, we need it for security in an age like this. And okay, that argument works, but it's also it turns into a massive control grid immediately.
Yeah.
And so there is a provision. There's actually a definition in the Genius Act bill, which I don't think Trump has signed it yet, but I think it's passed both our Senate and the House, and now goes to be signed by Trump. And if he doesn't sign it, it becomes law. But it has definitions for digital assets, digital money, that type of thing. And it talks about, we're going to build everything on the blockchain. And while Trump came into office the first day, he signed a executive order saying no central bank digital currency. What you just said is 100% correct. Central bank digital currency uses blockchain. That's what Pippa Malmgren was talking about 3.5 years ago at the World Government Summit. And she said it was serious enough we need a digital Bill of Rights. And by the way, there's no digital Bill of Rights in the Genius Act either.
It's interesting that many people have said along the way, the Federal Reserve will be expendable in the elite's plans. And I think what this Genius Act, Stable Coins Act, is going to do is mean that the Federal Reserve is expendable, but the government will still have control over everything through the stable coins. It won't be necessarily a Federal Reserve central bank digital currency, but it'll still have oversight. The government has to approve. Anybody that puts out a stable coin has to have the federal, if it's a big enough one, has to have the federal backing, and then state backing on some of the smaller ones. So basically the government gets to control, and they'll be programmable too. So it is a central bank digital currency, really, in anything but name as far as I'm concerned. And not that I'm an expert on it by a long shot, but there are a lot of people that know a lot more than I do about it that are saying this type of thing.
So look, I mean, I think, Patrick Wood, you can follow him at technocracy.news and get a lot of really good current relevant information. And he had an article up. I don't think he wrote it the other day. And the article said essentially, it's over. Yeah. It's over. I mean, it's here. And so I was saying this, that, while I was hopeful in some respects, I was also realistic enough to know that the momentum in this thing is not going to be stopped. I mean, we saw, Tony, as we drove 8,300 miles across the US. We saw massive server farm data installations everywhere we went. I didn't see the one in Indiana. It's not too far from Notre Dame, and also where I went to college. They took over a farm. They've built 6 of these massive data buildings, server rack buildings. These buildings are like as long as the Empire State building is tall, like 1,200 feet long. They have 6 of them there. It was a big article in the Wall Street Journal. They did a drone flyover of the area. They're planning on building at this one location 24 more. And I found out over the weekend from my niece who lives near there, the guy that sold the farm, they wanted his land badly. They paid him, I'm told, hundreds of millions of dollars more than it was worth. And why did they pick that farm? Because it's where 2 major electrical grid trunk lines cross. It's like right at the intersection of them, the east-west and the north-south, and they can tap into it there. It's exactly what you just were talking about.
Yeah, I mean, it's this huge. And then you've got the Real ID Act, of course, that came in as well, and the big, beautiful bill. And interestingly, I see that Larry Ellison, who was one of those people you mentioned right at the start of Trump's administration, with that, he presented them with a $500 billion thing. He's now supposedly the second richest man in the world. I'd say that there are probably people behind the scenes that are richer, but on the face of it.
Ellison's whole thing is Oracle's database. It's database. It's how they, interconnect and extract information from databases. If there's not anything else that describes control grid, I don't know what does.
Yeah.
Than a guy and it's always interesting the name that they choose for these companies, Oracle. It has these philosophical, religious overtones to it.
Yeah, well, I guess it is all forming, it is a religion. I can see how the false prophet and all that will be able to use AI for the image of the beast and all of that when it comes to it, big time. And you mentioned Peter Thiel.
Can I? Yeah,
Yeah.
we want to talk about Peter
Yeah,
Thiel.
just briefly, yeah.
Well, I don't know if you could talk about Peter Thiel briefly. It would be great um, if he would just shut up. And then we could kind of analyze what he said, but he keeps talking. So um, I think it was this week he did an interview with the New York Times with Rouse Douthat, who's sort of a nominal Christian at the New York Times. And this led to, and I watched part of it. You can find it on YouTube. Maybe it's 3 weeks old if I think about it. But it's interesting. So Peter Thiel claims to be a Christian, early investor, and a whole bunch of stuff like Facebook, SpaceX, Airbnbs, a billionaire, early backer of Donald Trump, leading donor to the 2016 campaign. And he's a friend and mentor to J.D. Vance, who probably, if everything goes along the track that it has, and we still have the United States in 3 years, he'll be the candidate, probably the Republican candidate for president. He's a guy from Ohio, from Middletown, Ohio, of all places. So anyway, so here's an article. The Spectator World has a new cover, and it's about AI. And the lead article in the magazine just came out Tuesday, July 15th, where the real threat of AI is spiritual. That's the editorial. We're primed to think of any existential threat from computers as fiction, but it's not fiction. And they note this paragraph. In a conversation with journalist Ross Douthat, Thiel was asked whether he wanted the human race to endure. He seemed unsure. I don't know, he said after a long pause. I would. There's so many questions implicit in this. Now, the simple answer to that question is yes, absolutely. He then, at the end of the interview, I think it's in 3 parts, it's several hours long. And I played a clip of it in my prophecy update on Sunday, July 20th. And there's also many instances in the past few months where Peter Thiel is running around doing speeches, TED Talks, or whatever, where he continually brings up the Antichrist and Armageddon. And I believe there was a spot in that interview with Ross Douthat where Douthat said, "Are you the Antichrist?" Now, it would seem that the answer to that question, if you ask me that question right now, I would say no, 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 no. He paused. It was another one of these pregnant pauses. And why is that happening? And he was talking, Tony, about eschatology. So this is the point I've been making in some of my recent prophecy talks. When secular people, when secular transhumanists technocrats speak in terms that are used in the Bible and prophetic passages, the Christian people first need to get a clue about those passages, and they need to pay attention to what those people are saying, because it's very indicative of the times in which we live.
Yeah. Well, he's gay. He's a transhumanist. He's, like you say, a Trump backer. He's also bought citizenship in New Zealand, so he has here for New Zealand is Peter Thiel's escape hatch. And he's a billionaire. He was one of the founders of PayPal too. He's also the Palantir, which is Trump is using Palantir big time, and so are other governments, part of this whole control grid, and for the war and the drone technology and all that you mentioned before, that all comes back to Peter Thiel.
Yeah, and it comes back to Palantir, and Palantir does have a contract with the government now to, I don't know how else to describe it, to hoover up everybody's data and centralize it.
Yep.
And so that's Oracle, that's database, that's Palantir. And a few months ago, there was a defense think tank This is something that's amazing to me as somebody who kind of watches what's going on. Everybody's got these conferences, they've got these webinars, they've got these seminars, they have these slick PDF publications all over the place. I mean, my hard drive, I have to clean my hard drive off, and I have a 2 terabyte hard drive. I'm running out of space every month because of the stuff that I can download and read. And they all put it out. It's not like they're hiding it. And so there was a big conference, think tank conference, called the Reagan Defense Forum. They brought in a whole bunch of defense guys. You can find the video. I played part of the video from Alex Karp, who is the CEO, co-founder of Palantir. And by the way, Palantir, I believe, is a word. The name of the company comes from the Lord of the Rings. Mm. So it has kind of a mystical, fictional aspect to it, just like Larry Ellison has Oracle. But Karp, and it's always interesting, his name is Karp. His hair is wilder than Albert Einstein's was. And his name is Karp, which is a bottom-feeding fish, which is kind of an interesting connection, I think. And he was talking about what we're going to do with AI here in America, because he's a gung-ho American. He wants America to lead the world in this. And he said, I will admit, Tony, I have extremely mixed emotions and feelings about this, because I understand where all of this is going. But I also, I don't know when my exit date is. Nobody knows when their exit date is. And so you want to live a peaceful life, until you're out of here. So I don't want bad guys to have control of this stuff. So I hear Alex Karp, and he says, we in the U.S. want to lead the world. And we want the bad guys. I'm paraphrasing what he said. You can watch the video for yourself. I want the bad guys all over the world to go to sleep and to wake up scared to death of us. Now, part of me likes that, because that's what I would expect our military would do. But the problem is that the technocrats, the transhumanists, are, I don't know how to say this the right way. Maybe you can throw your thoughts in here. They're operating outside the system. There's no regulation. So we put in the Genius Act that gives them more ability to act, right?
Yes.
But there's no regulation. And so I understand where Alex Karp is coming from, because we live in a world where Russia, Ukraine, China, and people that, might clearly be considered our enemies are racing ahead with this, and nobody, the EU is trying to put regulations in place, and it's a joke, because China's not going to follow that. China's going to steal and do what they've done with technology all the way along. I don't know what the answer is, okay? All I know is I live in a world where this stuff is not getting rolled back. And I live in a world where I'm increasingly looking forward to the return of Jesus to clean this mess up, because I don't know of any other solution at this point.
There is no other solution. And people that are putting, like the Dominionists, the Seven Mountains people that extolled, Trump as some sort of a man to fight this, when basically he's come forward and he's pushing it. And yes, you're saying, oh, well, America needs to lead it. That's what they're saying. But I look at it and go, this is just the Bible prophecy playing out. There is no stopping it. It doesn't matter who you put in there as a leader or whatever. It's not going to stop. And people can have their idea about some politician or other being the man that God's put there for the hour or whatever. Well, I see, God's, allowed them to be there to forward this whole agenda that is leading us into these end times prophecies like Revelation 13 and so on. So anybody that's putting their hope in any sort of politician or any other solution, I think it's time, it's well past that. We've got to realize this is where it's heading, and then we have to think, what do we do as individuals in keeping our life right, I guess, and how do we tap into God's wisdom in this situation, because it isn't going to go away, as you say, it isn't going to change, and it's just rapidly coming into place. And if it's only a few years away till Jesus does return, then it isn't going to stop. This is the trajectory we're on, and people need to really get that into their head. It's not like, oh, if we just do this thing and put this regulation in place, we can slow it down, we can stop it, we can regulate it. It's too late.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult. So I don't want to swerve off into another area. Part of the struggle that we all have is we have this the normalcy bias. We want to think that everything is okay, and there's nothing to worry about. And I'll admit, I see that too. And so I look at like all these things coming out of Washington, D.C. recently, the Epstein this and the Russian hoax files. And a lot of people on my political side of the aisle, I'm a conservative, are really upset about a lot of things. And it's Trump's base. But I was a trial lawyer. I know how difficult these cases are to put together. And so the Trump people have only been in place really for maybe 4 months. And in many cases, they're still not in place because, and so prosecuting people for these things is extremely difficult under the best of circumstances, and it takes a while. I was involved in a big criminal case for a client. In fact, some of that is still going on. It started in October of 2002. So here we sit, almost 23 years later, I'm still working on at least one small aspect of that case. It took years and years to put things together. And so it'll take a long time to put things together once you get access to everything on like Epstein and Russia and all this stuff. But in the meantime, the technocrats march forward with no restrictions.
Because the rest of it's a distraction. The news headlines will talk about Obama and a conspiracy against the Trump administration and so on, and people will buy into that. Meanwhile, these other things are slipping through and creating this digital control grid, and people are being entertained by stories about whatever star is doing this and that and the other thing, and oh, here's the latest photos of someone, doesn't she look good at 71 or whatever, and then you've got this other stuff, and it's distracting people from what's really the issues. And the really important stuff is getting put into place, like big building blocks to create this system really rapidly. That's how I see it.
Yeah, and so when this mark of the beast system comes about, it's flipping a switch. That's all they're going to have to do. It's not going to be, they're not going to have to build it.
Yeah.
They're not going to have to fund it or anything like that. And I will say, I don't know exactly what that system looks like, but I can't imagine that there's anything that it needs that isn't existent right now.
Yeah, it's definitely so much happening. It's just putting these final things into position, like the pieces in the jigsaw puzzle. But okay, so I guess we better look to wrapping up, but I don't want to leave this in a totally negative space. So as Christians, John, we still got to have hope. We still got to have hope in our salvation. We still got to have hope for our future. And so what would you say to people that are listening that are going, oh, this just, because some people get scared.
Yeah, look, I will only say from my own personal standpoint, I know about all of this. I study it. I talk about it. I don't do it to scare people. I do it to remind people of where their hope really is, that all of this stuff is temporary. I saw a secular guy, not a Christian, Jerry Seinfeld, the other day made a very good point. He goes, they said, well, you get a lot of negative feedback, don't you? And he goes, I don't care. I don't care. He said, I'm here for such a short time that I'm not going to let that stuff bother me. I'm going to focus on what I need to focus on. And what we need to focus on is Jesus and helping to build his church and sharing the gospel and discipling people even now. And so while I talk about all this, I really don't get scared. Okay. I see it happening. I know it's there. And maybe it's because I'm older and I know that under the statistical chances of me being around for a very, very long time is not that high. And so I don't worry about it. I know where I'm going. But I will also say that I think that the statistical chances of all of us being around here for a very, very long time until Jesus returns, that window's closing. And so people need to get right with the Lord right now. It's not something that you can shove off. It can change, and we've watched it change very quickly. And this is, as you know, this is operating on many, many different levels. It's just not the tech side. It's geopolitics, it's moral, it's religious, and it's sort of in the technocracy space. You're seeing a merging of the religious, spiritual, and technical in a way that I think a lot of us that follow this were always saying, I didn't think I would see this. I didn't think I would see this. And I joked with somebody last week, maybe I set up a tip jar that every time you say that, you have to throw a 20 in. And then whoever's running the tip jar could retire and try to get away from all of this. But I don't know. I don't sit around. I really don't sit around worried because I know where my hope lies and I know where my ultimate destination is with the Lord.
And we need to do that. And anyone that doesn't know the Lord needs to get their lives right now with God. I think it's also prudent to do some sort of preparations for things as best as we can. It's also really good to get some enjoyment out of life and just enjoy the simple things while we can as well, because we don't know how much longer we will even have that freedom. So enjoy the day as much as possible. Keep your lives right with God. And it's good to be educated on this stuff, but don't let it consume you. That's how I look at it. So, John, where do people find you?
Yeah, let me just say, Pam and I took a trip out west, and I remarked a few times, more than a few times during that trip, is the world is very, very big, and we are very, very small.
Yeah, true.
It's amazing how much space. There are more telephone poles than people than Wyoming and South Dakota and elsewhere. So where people can find me, fbchapel.com is the church website, Fellowship Bible Chapel, fbchapel.com, Fellowship Bible Chapel on YouTube. You can also just search my name, and then also Rumble, Real FBC, and we do have an app and that type of thing. And I will be leading a tour to the Holy Land, to Israel. We're going to try to get some unique sites in if possible. You know, it's always, I'm right now, a couple months ago, I was saying, I don't know if this is going to happen. I think it's going to happen now. That's in October 6th through the 20th. And there's a link for John Haller Israel Tour at fbchapel.com if you're interested in joining up on that.
All right, sounds good. Well, thank you for being on the show again today, John, and let's do it again soon.
Thanks, Tony. Best to you and Holly.
Cheers, thanks, and send our regards to Pam too. Folks, please make sure you subscribe to us at aminutetomidnight.com. Go down the right-hand side of your page where it says subscribe to blog, so you enter your email address and you'll get notifications of all of our videos and so on, and articles too. And A Minute to Midnight is run 100% by donations. definitely would appreciate any help that you can give us through donating. It's definitely getting harder to live, and costs are going up and so on, and even running the websites and things. So if you're able to donate, it's always much appreciated. You can do that at aminutemidnight.com, and the music used I've written, played and recorded. So God bless, folks, and God willing, we will be back in a few days' time with another episode of the A Minute to Midnight Show. In the meantime, keep looking up, keep your eyes on the Lord, and keep some joy in your heart.